started. Hello everyone, welcome to today's installment of the Intergraph Get Smart webinar series. I am Angela Conadoni and I am your host today. The subject of our webinar is CADWorx Isometrics Made Easy. Joining us on this webinar is Tox Liaguno. Tox is the CADWorx Regional Consultant for Intergraph. Tox, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Angela. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today, and welcome to the webinar. Today's webinar is intended to explain why Isogen is simply the industry standard for isometric drawing generation. We'll also see why other competing isometric solutions offer far fewer benefits as compared to Isogen. So during the first part of the webinar, we will be discussing Isogen and have a look at the new iConfigure utility for Isogen. We hope that this seminar will show you the benefits you will get from using iConfigure as opposed to the older project manager software. Along the way, to gain your feedback, we'll also ask you a couple of poll questions. Then we will compare Isogen to another competing product, this time from Bentley, and remind you why clearly Isogen is the industry standard for isometric deliverables. And finally, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. Okay, so it's time for our first poll question. So over to you, Angela.
Thank you, Tox. Okay, so yes, as mentioned, we do have a poll question, and the question appears on your screen. It is, what application do you use to create piping isometrics? So we have CADWorx, Smart Plant, AutoPlant, Plant 3D, or others. So if you can please select the answer that best applies to yourself, that would be much appreciated. And just as a reminder, we will be taking questions at the end. So there should be a toolbox on your screen. Please feel free to type your question in there at any time. So we'll leave the, I've got waiting just on a few more people to vote. Keep it open for a little bit longer. Okay, let's have a look at the results. So we have Tox. So we have 88% use CADWorx, and we have 13% using Plant 3D. Back to you. Okay, so not a big surprise, Angela. This just shows that CADWorx is getting momentum among end users, and it's on its way to becoming the leading AutoCAD-based plant design solution in the market. Okay, so let's proceed with the presentation. Isogen is the world's leading solution for the total automation of piping isometric drawing production. It was originally written by Alias Limited, and they were purchased a few years ago by Intergraph. It has become the Intergraph standard system for drawing piping isometrics. So Isogen is bundled with Intergraph Smart 3D, PDS, CADWorx, Caesar2, and SmartPlant Spoolgen. Isogen is also supported by all major piping design solution vendors like Aviva or Bentley. They will either bundle Isogen with their product or will output one of the two Isogen data files, the Isogen data file, IDF, or the piping component file, PCF. Shown here is a typical isometric drawing. So Isogen settings allow you to control the isometric output, basically what the drawing would look like. This includes the backing sheet, title block, effective drawing area, pipeline attributes, material list, cutting and weld list, among others. So a lot of users have been content so far in using Project Manager to create their projects and set up the corresponding isometric settings. There are actually two types of interfaces for Isogen. One is Project Manager, the other one is iConfigure. iConfigure 2014 is bundled with CADWorx 2015. Project Manager will no longer be installed automatically with CADWorx. However, it is still available as a separate install should you still need it. iConfigure is Isogen's companion product. It includes the new Isogen configuration panel, enabling users to easily customize and configure their isometric drawing output. It is a single user interface exposing all of Isogen's capabilities. So why should CADWorx users move to iConfigure? Well, for one thing, Project Manager is no longer supported. That means it will not be receiving any updates. Project Manager also used a lot of text files. You had the DDF files, MLD, POS, etc. And tweaking the Isogen settings meant you had to be familiar with what the text file was supposed to do. iConfigure introduced wizards that allow you to quickly set up and configure isometric styles for use in drawing, dimensioning, welding, and so on. So it eliminates the need to use those various text files and various editors just to alter drawing definitions, material list definitions, position text, alternative text, etc. Projects and styles can be password protected to guard against unauthorized changes. And of course, online help is quite comprehensive, and you can print the documentation as well. So upgrading from Project Manager to iConfigure is easy. Projects and style configurations can be imported into iConfigure, assuring you of identical isometrics. So inside iConfigure, we can bring in all sorts of information. For example, pipeline information and detailed sketches. The drawing setup wizard allows us to quickly set up drawing boundaries and attribute locations. The symbols editor can be used to override the default Isogen symbols. This shows a comparison of the iConfigure interface with CADWorx 2014 on the left and CADWorx 2015 on the right. So let's explain some of the changes which you see here. Before, like I said, we had to work with a lot of text files. iConfigure changed all that so that the changes were saved in XML files instead. And the interface on the left allowed us to do just that. Unfortunately, it was not very user-friendly. iConfigure 2014, which ran on top of CADWorx 2015, greatly improved the ease by which Isogen settings could be modified. So you will note the edit button highlighted in yellow. This opens up the Isogen configuration panel, or ICP for short. You will notice that the numerous Isogen settings have been divided into different panels or categories. Searching for a particular setting has been made a lot easier. The drawing setup tool from the previous iConfigure version is still available. The interface has become a lot more interactive, allowing you to work with the GUI, which previews the effects of your current settings. It allows us to quickly set up drawing boundaries, attribute locations, and material list arrangement. As always, online help is there to assist you. A comprehensive printable guide is available, consisting of roughly 500 or so pages of valuable information. Let's talk about the various category panels. How do they work? The hundreds of Isogen drawing settings have been organized into a hierarchy. This consists of 3 levels of content: style categories, style groups, and option groups. So for example, if we wanted to change dimensions, we would select the dimensions panel, which is basically the style category. It consists of several groups, one of which happens to be dimension styles. Selecting that brings us to the options for that style. So these options include standard dimensions, overall dimensions, locations, allowances, and so on. The options group panel, shown on the left side, breaks down the wide array of Isogen controls into manageable chunks of information. The drawing preview panel displays a sample isometric drawing that is representative of the current isometric drawing property settings. The preview drawing which you see is actually based on a sample piping component file or a PCF file delivered with the software. The report preview panel enables you to define the layout for the various report types. So cut list summary, growing cross-references, material control, site weld information, spool information, and others. So as you work, isogen configuration can display status and warning messages at the top of the preview window in the configuration view. In addition to the text description, each message type has an associated color code. So you have a red for error, you have like a yellowish color for warning, and green for just the status information. So with that, let's have a short demo on isogen and iConfigure. So we start by going into iConfigure, and we're basically going to create a new project. So I'll name it as stocks, and I'll just accept all of the different isometric styles that it has. Okay, so I get all of my different isometric styles. Then I can export that one to CADWorx so that CADWorx knows the existence of that style. So I'll just export to. So when you take a look at CADWorx and you, let's say, attempt to export a PCF file, you will see that the project which I created is already there. Okay, and different styles are also there, but of course only the final basic and the check styles are valid. When you hit the edit button, you go immediately into the isogen configuration panel, and these are the different categories which I mentioned earlier. Selecting the drawing setup tool brings you to this interface. So here you can specify, let's say, the size of the sheet that you want, how many sections it's supposed to have. Going to the drawing areas, you can refine it further, so the dimensions for the effective drawing area can be specified. Okay. The material list will allow you to control, let's say, the content itself of the material takeoff. So you can specify the how many sections it's supposed to have, the columns, so on and so forth. Attributes are the same, so these are the pipeline attributes, and you can specify, let's say, in what particular location they were supposed to be in the drawing area. Okay, so we hit cancel. Okay, so we go to drawing generation, and this one shows you the example PCF file, and then you have the resulting isometric based on the current isometric settings. Okay, so we can zoom in closer, pan it a bit. Okay, so if you go to overview, you have the different settings. Okay, so under the north direction, you can see there's always a small help available. If you select top right, then that basically flips the entire model. Okay, so let's bring it back to top left. Under output format, we can output, of course, as DWG, DXF, DGN, but there are other formats supported as well. Okay, so let's go back to final basic. And this time select dimension styles. Okay, so when you pick standard dimensions, okay, let's zoom in closer a bit so you can see. So you can specify what type of dimensioning you want for the different components. So for example, I can select pipe only. That regenerates the entire drawing and it dimensions only the pipes. Okay, we transfer it back to the default. You can also search, let's say, if I type in valve, then it gets all of the isogen settings related to valve. Whether it's for representation of the valve or dimensioning of the valve, it gets everything. Okay, so in this case, the spindles can be rotated such that they're aligned, let's say, with the current isometric plane, like that. And you can specify whether the valves are, let's say, dimensioned end to end, or let's say they're just dimensioned up to the center of the valve. Okay. You can also specify in a settings key, for example, settings 115, which happens to control the tolerance for the skew angle. So this means that if the line is less than 0.5 degrees, then Isogen will assume it's supposed to be horizontal. Anything greater than that, you'll get this triangle symbol, which says that it's a skewed line. Okay, so we can go back to this. This one contains the settings for the welds. Okay, so we can tell it that you want to show the welds, or you want to not display the welds. Or let's say you want to show the weld numbering or not. Okay. Now, double-clicking, let's say, on a component, for example, this particular weld, gives you all of the different items for associated with the weld. Okay, so we hit exit. We won't save that. Okay. So now we go back to CADWorx and we'll generate a simple isometric. So we'll use that particular line. So I'm going to process the entire line number, so all components related to that line number. So I'm going to use the final basic style. So I want to pick a line number. Then I just select a component which belongs to the line number. So this should generate about 2 isometric drawings. Okay, we'll open them. Okay, so that was fairly quick, and that gives you a nice representation of the isometric. So again, on the right side, you have your material takeoff, again, fully customizable. And on the graphics area, you see the point where it actually splits off from drawing number 1. Okay. So that's about it for the short demo on Isogen and the icon figure. Okay. So in a nutshell, the following summarizes the important benefits you get if you opt to use icon figure. So you have an intuitive GUI to control all of the Isogen settings, wizards for configuring the drawing template and detailed sketches. When you want to change the style settings, they're now saved to XML files. And of course, you have that nice drawing preview, which allows you to visualize the isometric output based on the current set of Isogen settings. Finally, you have advanced searching and help functions to make the program easier, so you don't need to memorize those Isogen settings keys anymore. Okay, now it's time for our second poll question. So over to you, Angela.
Thank you very much. So, okay, so the next poll question is on your screen, and the question is, what percentage of your time is devoted to creating isometrics? So we have about 20%, about 50%, more than 50%, or I don't create piping isometrics. So while we wait for everyone to select the answer that best applies to them, just a reminder, you can ask questions at any time by typing your question in the toolbox. Also, this webinar recording will be, a link will be posted to, will be emailed to you, as well as a link to the past webinars if you have missed the other two from the series. Okay, well, let's have a look at the results. So we have 60% said about 20%. We had equal 10% for both about 50 or more than 50%, and then 20% said I don't create piping isometrics. back to you.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that information, Angela. So it just goes to show you that whether, especially if you used to create the isometrics manually, it's a very time-consuming and tedious process. So iSurgeon will really help you a lot, you know, when you want to generate those isometric deliverables. Okay. So now for something interesting. So as with the CADWorx, Bentley's AutoPlant suite of plant design solutions is also AutoCAD based. Okay. Currently on Select Series 6 or SS6 as they like to call it, AutoPlant embedded an iSurgeon engine for isometric production until SS4. So before they were using iSurgeon. SS5 saw Bentley break away from iSurgeon and the introduction of a new isometric engine. So the Bentley OpenPlant Isometrics Manager, or OPIM, is now included as part of AutoPlant Modeler, a 3D plant design software. So basically, how does it stack up against iSurgeon? Is it better than iSurgeon? Is it inferior to iSurgeon? So let's see OpenPlant Isometrics Manager in action. So it starts off by going into a configuration like this. So this is Select Series 5 of the OPIM software. And on the left side, you have a project browser. So you can specify, let's say, all of the different lines which are present in your current project. And you can select, for example, L1001. And you can tell it to generate that particular line number. So it can generate an isometric from that. Okay. So to configure the software, it looks basically like this. So you have you can specify whether the output format is DGN or DWG. Okay. So fewer formats than iSurgeon. So they have their own isometric styles. So for example, IFC happens to be one of them. So you have settings for placement, converter settings, dimensioning, insulation, so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll close that. So when you flip to, let's say, AutoPlant Modeler, let's say I want to create an isometric for this line. This one happens to be line L1004. So what I do is I just go to create isometric via OPIM, and I can create a filter. So the filter tells the system to retrieve all components on line L1004. That way I don't need to pick them manually on screen. Okay, so under the isometrics, you have the different isometric styles. So I select OK, and then it processes the, basically it generates a PCF file as well, and then calls OpenPlant Isometrics Manager. Okay, so that one is done. So I just do a right click, and then I can tell it to show me, for example, the resulting PCF file. Okay. So you can send the PCF file to Caesar or to CADWorx. Select Show Isometric, and it fires up the main interface for OPIM. Okay. It is MicroStation based, as you can see. So I'll just select Fit View, and I'll zoom in, let's say, to this MTO. Okay, so it looks like the normal arrangement of items in the MTO for iSurgeon. It actually does look like a standard isometric, standard iSurgeon isometric. But this is one thing which is interesting. So for example, if I select text node editor, this one allows me to specify points on the model, okay, and you can number those points, and the corresponding fields will be actually be printed on those points. So let's go back to the isometric. I can also say I want to show the component information. So I can select this, I can pick this pipe, and it shows me the database information for the pipe. So it actually reads the database behind it. Same, let's say, for a valve and for a flange. Now what's interesting here is if I rotate the model, for example, if I go to top view, it actually looks like this. Okay, it's actually a three-dimensional model rotated in such a way that it looks like a 2D isometric. Again, if I go to right isometric, again it looks like that. So you can see it's really a 3D model. And going into an isometric view is the only normal view for this drawing. Okay, so that's about it for that software. So in summary, this one is an analysis or a comparative analysis between Isogen and OpenPlant isometrics. So CAD engine is CADWorx 2015, and the other one is AutoPlan Modeler SS6. Note that the AutoCAD platform, we have more AutoCAD versions that we can support. So we have 2012 all the way to 2015, both 32 and 64-bit. Whereas for OpenPlant isometrics, it only supports one version, 2014, 64-bit. Okay. Isogen is fully included with the CADWorx install, so you don't need to install anything. OPIM is not included with AutoPlan, so it requires a separate install. Output formats, Isogen is DWG and DGN. Okay, forgot to include that one. Isometrics is the same, but DGN is, well, it's 3D, not actually 2D. For component information, we don't have any data associated, for example, with the Isogen component. So it's basically a flat 2D drawing, a literally flat drawing. And the only information you can have regarding a component is if there's an annotation or a dimension or a note attached to it. In OPIM, it goes one step further because you can actually query the information from the component itself. For Isogen, for the workflows for Isogen, we have an in-session workflow. That means we can generate the isometric while inside CADWorx. OPIM, you can generate it inside the AutoPlan or outside AutoPlan. So it's either in session or out session. CADWorx, Isogen is included as part of the licensing for CADWorx. OPIM, although it's included, if you opt to use the out session process, it requires a separate license. Okay. So in an in-session workflow, the isometric is generated while inside the 3D piping application. So this was the case before when Isogen was still bundled with AutoPlan. The only change now is OPIM has taken its place. In an out-session workflow, isometric is generated outside the 3D piping application. So this was not possible before with Isogen. So OPIM connects directly with the plant project database and retrieves all line numbers which it can possibly process. But whether you use an in-session or out-session mode, the final output is still the same. You have a 2D isometric, which happens to be intelligent, and 3D at the same time. Okay. So for isometrics configuration, it's done using the OPIM isometrics configuration utility, or as in the case of Isogen, of course, we have iConfigure. Okay. So in summary, Isogen is highly configurable. It's the most automated engine available today for piping isometric drawing production. The system can be fully customized to meet users' specific requirements and drawing standards. So Isogen can produce drawings in all commonly used 2D CAD formats, including AutoCAD, MicroStation, and Intergraph Smart Sketch as well, eliminating the need to manually edit isometric drawings significantly reduces fabrication and on-site construction errors. So consistent drawing content is provided through isometric repeatability. This means it ensures that the number of the drawings, the basic content, and the spool and the weld numbers following the pipe design changes remain consistent from isometric to isometric. Isogen's companion product, iConfigure, enables users to customize and configure their isometric drawing output. So users can choose from a range of options to obtain the output that they require. So it basically simplifies Isogen configuration. It saves time and improves the value of your deliverables. So other isometric systems are out there and they may challenge Isogen, but the fact still remains that Isogen is the standard for isometric drawing creation. It is a proven, accepted, and continually evolving application aimed at ensuring your success. Okay, so now let's go to Q&A. Angela, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. So yes, it's time for questions, and please feel free to type them into your toolbox. So we do have a few that have come in. So the first one is, we have a copy of CADWorx 2014. Will iConfigure 2014 work on this older version?
No. You need to install CADWorx 2015 to be able to use iConfigure 2014. You can still do a parallel install of CADWorx to be able to get two versions of iConfigure. So basically that means you install a CADWorx 2014 and 2015. Then you get the two iConfigure versions.
Thank you. Next one is, can I use the settings which I created in Project Manager or the older iConfigure software in iConfigure 2014?
Yes. Settings and projects from those two can be imported into the new version of iConfigure. So this makes the transition to the new system virtually painless.
Thank you. Can I use Isogen to generate ISO's out session, i.e. outside of the piping application?
Okay, interesting one. Isogen can only be used within CADWorx or any other application that is bundled with Isogen. So for example, PDS, Smart 3D, and Caesar2 all have Isogen. In order for you to perform an out session processing, you need to export PCF files from the CADWorx model and feed them to Spoolgen. Unfortunately, the high cost of Spoolgen may not justify it unless you have a large number of spools to process.
Thank you. We already own Isogen for another modeling system we use on some projects. Can we use this license with CADWorx?
How is that again, Angela?
We already own Isogen for another modeling system we use on some projects. Can we use this license with CADWorx?
Another modeling system. Okay. The answer basically is no. Isogen is licensed for use on specific modeling systems, and these licenses cannot be interchanged. For example, you cannot use the Isogen in Caesar2 to create ISOs in another application. And besides, Isogen is already included in CADWorx anyway.
Thank you. What is a stress isometric and how do I create this?
Stress iso. The stress isometric is basically a modified version of the normal isometric. Instead of a material takeoff or bill of materials, which is normally printed on the right-hand side, we have results from the stress analysis package. So this could include forces and moments, displacements, support reactions, code stresses. Okay, so Isogen and iConfigure is included in every seat of Caesar2. So the stress ISO basically allows you to convey the underlying geometry as well as the stress analysis results without the need to print out a thick report.
Thank you. Next one is, how do you set up the pipeline attribute?
The pipeline attributes can be imported by using a CSV file. So you can create a CSV file. So it's basically comma delimited. So for each particular line, you can specify, let's say, the line number as well as the different attributes for it, whether, let's say, it's operating pressure, temperature, or what. And then this one is just called while inside iConfigure. and that basically prints them out at the lower part, let's say, of the drawing.
Thank you. How does Isogen interface with Caesar 2 for analysis and feedback?
How does Isogen interface with Caesar 2? Isogen is actually included as part of Caesar 2. So in much the same way that Isogen is included with CADWorx. So the Isogen in Caesar 2 allows you to create a stress isometric. So because it's a PCF file, you can generate PCF file, you can also send it out to CADWorx to regenerate the 3D piping model.
Thank you. So we have another question. So can I import 2015 Caesar 2 file into a 2013 CADWorx?
Can you import the 2015 Caesar 2 file into 2013 CADWorx? Well, the only way you could do so is through PCF, and I don't think the PCF version has changed quite a bit. So not sure about this though, but yeah, basically if you can export the PCF out from Caesar 2, then I don't see why it cannot be regenerated inside CADWorx 2013.
Thank you. Can revision clouds be placed in the isometric?
Now you can. So every part, every component now has a revision property. So the revised components can be shown with a highlight or a cloud in the Isogen generated drawing.
Thank you very much. So I think that seems to be the end of our questions today. Thank you everyone for sending those questions. Now before I end the webinar, do you have any closing comments? Tox.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone who attended this short webinar. Hopefully we've given you enough information in iConfigure to justify moving from Project Manager or the older iConfigure to the newer iConfigure software. So hope to see you again in the subsequent seminars.
Thank you so much. So thank you very much, Tox, for the presentation today. As mentioned, we will send everyone an email with a link to the recording so that you can download and watch again if you'd like to. On behalf of Intergraph and the Get Smart webinar series, we would like to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. So that does conclude the webinar. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.